So I'm not really fitting into this panel. I'm not really philology work that I'm gonna present today in here. I'm more a music person, as a lot of you guys know. But rather than talking about music, I will have a little bit of sound, but I wanted to talk about my research methodology. As a musicologist, I always look into music and sound, how it works, and how it's connected as a person and environment. But not just musicologist, the one that I have as a studied, is called ethnomusicology. So we combine with the anthropology discipline, and what we do is we actually go in and hang out with those singers and drinking vodka and make recording. And so learning songs, that's what we do. And I have a lot of ethnography in here. So what Phil was talking about, a lot of stereotype of Mongolia. And I come across a lot of stereotype of Mongolia and Mongolian nomadic life. But it is truth that Mongolians are nomads. And when you really look into music, and especially Urtindo, the long song, it's just so much, like connected into it. So I'm gonna attempt to present some of the stories I came across, and especially I want to focus on this concept of mobility, because nomads, and as I research, I move around a lot, basically chasing the singers. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and most of the time I just stayed on the road, tent, and just 잠다, always there. So I'm gonna just read over my paper because that's faster, but on the way I lost my conclusion page in here too. So we'll see like what's gonna happen. Finding singers has always been the main challenge and the most enjoyable part of my fieldwork. And it has recently become an interesting compass for my work. In the Mongolian countryside, where there are neither clear road nor precise addresses, I go around asking where a singer might be living. When I ask where a singer is, the most common response I get is, "Oh, you just missed her. She moved a few kilometers that way." Have no idea what that is, right? So that way, pointing across the endless steppe, nothing there. In my fieldwork, following the finding singers between 2007 and 2017, this is kind of route that I've been doing the past 10 years. I had to take a different way of doing fieldwork from most who focus mainly on staying in one or two sites or following one or two musicians. My fieldwork started by, like I said before, chasing singers to collect different styles of long song, which I later continued in Ulaanbaatar and developed through a process of constant traveling back and forth between UB and countryside, and from one province to another, or from one local som to distant countryside. While the stories of singers and demonstrations and explanations from the singers about long song are the primary basis of my field data, the experiences of my own mobility in finding these singers has also become part of the process of learning, as well as an ethnographic method. These experiences in my fieldwork gave me an understanding of how Mongolian nomads lived and conceptualized their lives within their environment and their nomadic movement, and becoming the basis of their current traditional culture. Through this ethnographic research, I have identified two ways of understand the concept of mobility in Mongolian Urtindo. One is poetic concept, which comes from the mobility which has been learned through traveling as nomads, as at least like nomads, within the rural region, the countryside, and in which their musical sensibility is expressed through the lyrics and sonic structures. The second is the socio-political aspect of singers' locational movement and resultant change of their singing and overall perception of the genre. Through two very different places, so it's back and forth to rural, the countryside, and UB, the urban. This mobility relates to and result in the predicament of the contemporary landscape of Ultindo singers and Ultindo, the songs. With my limited time today in this presentation, I will introduce a few stories. I was gonna focus on only poetic side of this mobility, but I'm gonna just give out, all those sort of like nature of a mobility through the stories today. So this is kind of big map that where I went. And we stopped in the road always asked, then they okay, go that way and that way and that way. Even like a small kid, they know all this, you go this way and that way, that way. I don't even see that way, right? So, and it's like sometimes you don't even see any road. But then somehow these Mongolians have amazing eyes, and then these drivers they just keep going like there's no road. There is one. And like they keep going, right? So that's the time. The road has been really fantastic revenue for me. So the first story I want to share is the first mobility story. In 2007, almost 10, 11 years ago, in my travel to the province of Skvatar, in the far eastern area, I was looking for a singer called Chagang Huheng. I've heard about another singer from Oyunchimak. There are a lot of Oyunchimak, right? In Asugasum. I'm driving a Bungmero today, so sometimes it's confusing. She said Chagang Huheng would be a great singer for me since she knew a lot of long songs, and that I could meet her in somewhere near Ongonsum. Do you see Ongonsum there, right? So I was ambitious. So instead of going Ongonsum directly from here, like I need to see the singers, so I went to Ethnographic, and then I spent a lot of time hanging out in here, and then I went to Dariga, right? Here, all those things. And then I came to Ongonsum. And then I was looking for this Chagang around this area. And somebody said, some neighbor said, no, she's not here. Where did she go? And the neighbor said, she moved to Hartsungso. So hot in the summer. So right? So when I'm here, so I was looking for, where's Chagang? And then we found the border there, in countryside, not in Hartsungso, but outside in here. And then where's your mom? Oh, she moved to Ulaanbaatar. I came all the way from here, moving around, and Chagang Huheng. And I'm like, where did she go in Ulaanbaatar? She's working at Suki House. So you know where Suki House is? It's right, the Chiruk. And then I was staying. Right? It was right next to Suzuki House. I was actually living in there, right next to her, and she was playing in here. And I went all the way down, and then there I came back to UB and met her. It was just such a big disappointment in my very first fieldwork trip. But I started noticing the mobility of rural singers to urban area. At the time, and later, I easily found the dynamic migration of rural singers to the city, not only for their music careers, but also for various other reasons. Most of their kids are in UB, so they move for their, hospital or something. And this mobility has been continuing during the next 10 years of my subsequent research. This movement of rural singers to the urban area has been the essence of the various influences on Ultindo practices in Ulaanbaatar, but has also created close dialogues and interrelationships and exchanges of musical ideas between these two musical spaces, rural and urban. And nowadays, a lot of urban singers, like professional singers, they go back to countryside to learn this nomadic sensibility. Okay, so that's the first story. The second one, so this is Dongguk. In Dongguk during during summer 2017, it was the last just summer, I was looking for two singers, one called Buriat, the other was Sumuruhu. Both were grandmothers and teachers of Arungerer, a singer I already met in top IMAC. To spot where, first of all, the singer, Buriat, was located, we drove and asked around and drove again for almost half a day. But we couldn't find her. When we were about to give up and go back to the town center, we saw a woman in her mid-60s doing something in the middle of step. Yes, that's her. We asked her directions, and finally we made it to Buriat's house when it was starting to get dark. This is the Buriat bed, and it was the house. This is the old day that we were driving around. So next day morning, so I had an interview with the Buriat, and next day morning, when I was waking, and then after that we kind of drove away from her house and then made a tent and slept there. And next morning when I was wake up and get out of tent, I realized that we had not gone far from where we had started. Regardless of how long we had to travel to find the singer, which I felt like, all day long, like we go that way, and that way, coming this way, right? But then when I woke up, I was like, I could see that's where we started. So I realized then how distance could be conceptual in Mongolian's endless step. It could be extended by jam, road, with a mindset of longing, yet it could be completely collapsed, physically right next to each other. Just like the melody of a long song can be elongated and shortened by different singers, different manipulations. So a lot of you know long song, so it's like for example, right? Right? Was it like 5 seconds? Right? That I gave that kind of main structure. This is from Smith. So that's how long song works, right? It's very short, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, but singers make elongated, not just vowels, and they combine with this consonant too, musical syllables, and depending on how good you are, you can elongate more, right? So it's really coming together with this concept of distance. Or also I have learned how subtle the Mongolian landscape is. So it looks all same, right? But exactly like long song. Some people said, oh, it sounds all same. It's not. It's not, right? The subtlety in here. The following day, we met several singers on the way, and while we were heading towards next singer, Sumuruhu. If you remember, I said I was looking for Sumuruhu. So when we found her encampment, Sumuruhu's encampment, and met her, we realized, rather she recognized us, me and my colleague, that she had been the person who had given us the direction to the singer Buriat. So we go around. And that was the person. We're looking for a singer Sumuruhu. We had a name. We just didn't have the face. And then we walked in, and then she said, you asked me the direction yesterday. My colleague and I was so embarrassed. We could just ask, do you sing long song, right? Are you Sumuruhu? But we couldn't. So So with a great joy that I had met her, but also perplexed, I had just passed her by, I realized how serendipitous meeting through constant mobility was a pervasive and essential event, which Mongolians accept in their everyday nomadic lives, and which is deeply embedded in the emotion of the song lyrics. When a driver could not understand the explanation of the how to get there, we had a local ride with us to find the singer. On such journeys, the car becomes a classroom, just like quite a discovery in motion. When the locals start to talk about the landscape, the names of the locations, the way of herding, the local people, and what has been happening in current season, the singer Suho on the left, 68, who wrote with us in Tarsong Som in Oops, to Hoped to his sister's house, talked about the mountains and ridges of the western landscapes and its colors as we looked through the car window. I would never have seen the different colors as he described them if he had not distinguished them by explaining the various angles of the suns and shade and the topographical relationships of the hills and mountains, because not knowing that, it all seemed the same to me. When I moved off with another singer, Lanto, on the right, in far southeast Aimak, Dornokop, to meet another singer, Oyunbilak, Lanto started singing the rare kind of Buddhist ultindo, Kurudo, in the car that she had in fact composed because she were near Senshant, where the 19th century Buddhist poet and composer Dansun Rapcha, who had written a lot of early longsong poetry and lived. She told me the stories and legends that related to regions and the styles that deeply embedded in those regional styles, song called the Hakjin melody, kind of branch of the Borjagang melody. So the last story is not here. So in Hoop School 2013, when I was meeting with the Darhat ethnic singer, Chokpatrach, he called up his close friend and Marush, who is also a singer. Chokpatrach's singer technique was so great. And I expected the same thing from his friend, Marush, so I decided to wait. Chokpatrach said his friend, Marush, would be there in an hour or so. After several hours of waiting and have had dinner, so typical of Mongolia, right? Dinner, the weather outside was cold, typical Mongolian winter, and it had started to get dark. After a couple more hours, I thought perhaps his friend had decided not to come. But as I was about to leave, the singer arrived. He said his motorcycle had broken down. He had walked for about 3 hours in minus 40 degrees, cold. I felt really bad and said he should not have made the effort to come. He said, quote, "It's more important to see my friends. And to come here, the distance and time did not much matter." Okay, from here, I lost my conclusion part, so I'm gonna just use my computer to finish my paper, sorry. So he could not walk because of the weather. He could not sing much after that cold walk. But I learned from this experience that in this endless, wide open countryside, only mobility can produce something from nothing, which was meeting with a friend in this case, and the importance of connection among the people through the empirical experience of meeting and be there and together, since they don't know when they would meet again, only they have moved on. So my closing thought, through these experiences in my mobile fieldwork, I learned how Mongolian nomads lived and conceptualized their lives on the move in the moment while I was waiting for the herder singers to come back. And in the moment where I was moving, trying to find the singers, and I heard the sound of animals and the sound of the wind, the sound of other herders calling, and looked out the landscape. What I saw and heard then became a part of how I could evoke the space, the colors, senses, and the time of Mongolia. In this way, the tunes and stories of Urtindo that I learned from numerous singers came alive. For me, living with the singers and their singing tradition has become moving with, or moving towards or away from the singers and their songs and experiencing the landscape and movement. This experience offered me, as a temporary nomad myself, a unique opportunity for self-observation and self-knowledge, end quote. And as Christopher Small, musicologist, by the way, emphasized the relationship between the performer and the listener in musicking, I was building a relationship with the singers and the landscape and the sound through my own mobility and through understanding their relationships, which are created also through their nomadic mobility. Thank you. So we had a lot of questions before, so can I have just only one question?
Okay, do I have a question?
Any questions?
Any comments?
Any comments?
Yes, please. Ta.
ялангуяа их модтой газар ч юм уу нэрийг бодоход цаатан бол утын дууч байдаг юм уу өөрөөр модтой газар чинь тэр гэсэн тийм санаа хэлжсэн энэ хэлцээ яг одоо өндөр ууланд ч юм уу одоо тийм их одоо их модтой хангаа газар юм өндөр уулмол одоо утын дуучтай чирчээ уу хэлцээ.
Well, usually, when we talk about the melodic line of Urtindo, a lot of people say it's really, well, it's following the landscape, the topology. So in the Hanga area, there are a lot of singers, and there is Urtindo, a lot of Urtindo, and imitating all those topology. And if you go to west side, and they're imitating a lot of mountain, right? So it's a kind of like imitating the mountain. But some of singers from Hart, Central Hart, think some of the Lumong in West area is not really Lumong because it's kind of different topology, right? So, but then like the Western Lumong singers, like certainly this is a Lumong, just a way of elongating. It's really ups and downs, it's just a different way of doing it, but not really exactly same as Central Hart, but that
Anyone else? We'll take only one comment or question. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Sunmin Yoon.